Hey everyone, Mecha here, and welcome to this Farmdom 6 The Binding Blade Iron Man tier list. We're going to be making a tier list that is actually useful to people. Usually tier lists are just vehicles for discussion that allow people to talk about which units are better, like who's technically slightly superior overall to other units. And that is interesting at all, but I want to make more tier lists that can actually be used for something practical. And in this case, the use would be, I'm about to do an FE6 Iron Man, and I don't know what units I should deploy, use, train, invest into, or I just did an FE6 Iron Man, but I died, I got a game over, my Roy died, and I want to know what I could do better, or I did an FE6 Iron Man before, but I didn't get the true ending, and I want to get the true ending, or anything like that. So the advice from this tier list will be to help you with that, if that's something you're struggling with, or that's a challenge you would like to do, but you want to have a good starting point. Do you have to adhere to the advice that a person says on the internet? No, you don't have to. You can do whatever you want, obviously. But if you're looking for an extra starting point, then this video is for you. So as you can see here, I made a giant tier list of like many different tiers. How many can you see right now? You can see them all. But I didn't give them names yet because I think it would be more interesting if I revealed them along the way. And it's easier to explain the units by the titles of the tier list, so I only inserted a couple. You'll see why. We'll start from the top and then work our way down. So we'll start with the best tier, and every tier is more a description of like how to use a unit than necessarily comparing the units. They're also not going to be in the order from good to bad. This is just categories I put them to make it easier to figure out what the unit is actually for. A lot of units that are going to be high on the list maybe shouldn't be deployed for every chapter, and some units on the lower end of the list might be good to deploy for a couple chapters for several reasons. Iron Man is very different from usual play, and sometimes a unit dies, something unexpected can happen, a good unit might not be available, a bad unit might be the best choice, and I'm going to try to factor that in when I'm going over units. That said, the units in best are units that, if you can, you probably should always deploy them. They're a good idea to invest into. Do you have to use them? No, but they're absolutely good, and you should know that if you're not deploying them, the reason better be either they're dead, or you don't want to for some reason, you want to challenge yourself, you don't have room for them because you're using all your favorites. That is all perfectly fine, but they are good. They are really good. So, to no one's surprise, we're going to put Milady up here. We're going to put, I'm just going to fill a tier list right now, like fill a whole tier and then talk about them, I guess. We'll put Rutger in there. These are the units that I think you should always use. Milady only joins midway through the game, but when she joins, and maybe with a little bit of training, she is by far the safest and strongest unit you can use. She has one weakness, which is arrows and I guess air caliber, and even that weakness is solved by getting the Delphi shield in chapter 16, stealing it from Narcian. At that point, Milady is just near invincible, and even when she joins, she's already on par with a lot of other units. She is just so powerful. A lot of people say that's because of hard mode bonuses, and that is partially true. She does get a lot of strength and defense and speed from the bonuses in hard mode compared to normal mode. Normal mode Milady is a bit worse. The tier list kind of assumes hard mode, by the way, but it like 99% overlaps with normal mode. But for hard mode bonuses, it's definitely something I should emphasize, that it is for hard mode. But even in normal mode, I would still put Milady near the top. She's just that good. Her bases are just really good, and her growths are good enough. She's gonna cap on average. You can promote her early if you want to. You don't have to promote her all the way, like raise her all the way to 20, and then like promote her. I think if you promote her at like 15, she's still most likely to cap all the stats you really care about: strength, skill, speed, defense. Even if she doesn't cap them, they're gonna be like 1 or 2 from capping most likely. She's just that helpful, and I think flyers in general are very helpful to have in FE6, and most flyers have some kind of problem. They're a little fragile, a little bit difficult to train. Milady does none of those problems, so you get like all the benefits of being able to ignore terrain, reach objectives faster, rescue drop a really powerful combat unit across the mountain somewhere to contest a village. Those kind of things are helpful even in Iron Man, because they can get you stat boosters, or money to buy stat boosters, or money to buy good weapons, or kill a status staff enemy somewhere. All this is just super helpful, and having it thanks to Milady is just nice. I don't think I have to convince you Milady is good. I think the Desert chapter alone is enough to just put Milady in best, but there's like 10 other chapters after that where she's also the best. Then we have Rutger, who joins a lot earlier. Very fast, very accurate. Can use the Chapter 7 Hero Crest to become even more of that. Gets a lot of criticals. Very useful for killing bosses. If you don't have Rutger, especially not promoted Rutger, for a lot of bosses like the Chapter 8 boss, Legends, Legans, or like the Berserker bosses in Chapter 12 and Chapter 9, so the Western Isles chapters, and a lot of other general bosses that you just want to Armor Slayer, but like someone like Zealot or Marcus or even Deke, they're just not going to have the hit and the speed or the crit to kill them anytime soon. Now, oftentimes in FE6, when you're at the boss, you're not really stressed for timing. You can take your time waiting for your Armor Slayers to hit. But if you miss often enough, then they might recover thanks to the throne. Or maybe there's some reinforcements that are behind you and you want to finish the map quickly before they catch up to you and kill you. Or maybe you just want it over with fast. For whatever reason, having a guy that kills a boss more reliably than anyone else is just good. And even besides that, in a chapter like Chapter 5, where you are fighting bandits in that big kind of mountainous map with a gate you can open, having a guy that just doubles almost everything and maybe optionally one-rounds them with a killing edge, it just takes a lot of pressure off your team. So I think Rutger is very, very, very good and very safe. I experienced an Iron Man without Rutger, where he got like crit killed by something very early on. I think Eric, the boss of his chapter, killed him. And very much later on, I ended up doing an Iron Man with Rutger, where I had him available for the whole game, and it felt like I was playing on easy mode compared to hard mode. It was just night and day. Just very simple unit to use. And again, he gets hard mode bonuses. In normal mode, he's still good, but he stands out more in hard mode. Percival, like Milady, but can't fly, and then has axes. CR axes, but still, he has axes. So, very, very good, very bulky guy. Recruit him in Chapter 15, it's much easier. Chapter 13 is harder, and you get a worse Percival because he doesn't get hard mode bonus there. The way hard mode bonuses work in FE6 is that they are only given to reinforcements, and Percival starts on the map in Chapter 13, but people that spawn on the map later than like the chapter start, they get hard mode bonuses. It's not an intended feature. It's why Ray and Douglas do not get hard mode bonuses, even though they also spawn on the map. They don't just start as enemies. I think they spawn during preps instead of during the chapter. It's very silly. But Percival does spawn during Chapter 15 as a reinforcement somehow. I don't even know how that works. Like, he doesn't... Come to think of it, why the heck does he get hard mode bonuses? Doesn't matter. He does. He one-rounds things. His only real flaw is, like, accuracy. He doesn't always hit. But it's not that much worse than your other team members. He can often switch to, like, an Iron Sword if he does really have to hit something. Most notably, compared to, like, Milady, I think his resistance is a lot better, and he doesn't have any weaknesses besides Horse Slayers. So it's much easier for him to go in before you get the Delphi Shield. Yeah, it's very brain-dead unit. Very good. And then we got the Dancers here. I also put Ninian in best when I made my FE7 tier list, and I know there was at least one comment that was like, well, these units are a little hard to use, they shouldn't be this high. No, I insist that the Dancers are this helpful to have. I think it is a pitfall to ditch your Dancer. And the reason why I think that is because if you use your Dancer, and even if they die, they're still going to do so much for you before they die, because getting an extra unit, getting someone like Rutger, or Percival, or Milady, or a staff user, an extra turn, can be such a massive difference maker. You get one of those every turn. Every turn you get an extra really, really good action, and all you have to do to facilitate it is check enemy ranges to make sure they don't die, and you're good. And even if they had like more HP and defense, you would still be worse off if they got attacked by an enemy. Because they wouldn't counterattack, so even if they dodge, you're doing worse. So just check enemy ranges and make sure they don't die, and you're good. But I understand that they're harder to use than these other three. That's something you should keep in mind. But that's why we're here, so I can tell you that stuff. Yeah, especially when you're starting to fight like enemy status staff users, and you have like units getting berserked and slept and silenced. Having an extra one of these to juggle your restore a little bit, making sure you have an extra way to cure your people that are statused, is just really good. You can also extend the movement range of someone like Milady. You can do, like, if you know you want to drop Rutger somewhere with Milady, you can have Milady rescue Rutger, dance for the pair of them, and then Milady flies somewhere, drops them off somewhere else, and they are both ready to fight everything. That's just like one thing they can do, one of many. I think they're really, really good. So next up, these were pretty brain dead. I guess I'm kind of doing them one by one now because I think they require a little bit more elaboration. This tier I'm going to call Use While Fresh. And that's being called like that because these are units that at one point are really good, but as the game goes on, they get relatively worse compared to the other options you have, and at some point you might want to stop deploying them. But it'd be a mistake to, well, not a mistake. It would be suboptimal to keep fielding them or to never use them. It's got to be something in between. Do you always have to be optimal? No, but when you're using these units, it's probably good to keep in mind, like, okay, these units, I'm going to use them. I'm not going to feed kills to them, super hard. Like if I gotta take a kill with them, I will. But generally, I'm gonna use these to help my other units grow stronger, my training projects that are in the next tier, really. But they're not here to get kills for themselves, they're here to support the team, and they're here to get dangerous enemies off my back. So they're the units that start off a little bit better than most of my other units. Obviously, the main example of this is Marcus. If it was a normal tier list, like an FE6 hard mode, efficiency tier list, LTC tier list, Iron Man, no, not Iron Man, specifically not Iron Man, utility tier list, efficiency tier list, whatever you want to call it, I usually put Marcus like where Marcus or where Milady and Rutger are. I think he's that good. Percival, I don't know, but he's available for the entire game. He's really, really good for a portion of it. He's so... I don't want to say the word essential because I don't believe that any unit is essential in Fire Emblem almost ever, with some very weird exceptions, but he is so close to it that he might as well be there. So even though you would only field him for maybe the first 10 chapters or so, maybe the first 12, maybe the first 13, you wouldn't field him for the entire game, but he's just so good in the early game that you want to use it. And that's why I call it the tier still red, because I think he's that good. I don't know if the rest of them really fit in here, but they do fit the use while fresh label, so that's why they're in there. But Marcus, obviously, in hard mode, he can weaken enemies for your other units to kill in Chapter 1 and in Chapter 2, and it keeps going like that. Sometimes enemies are more dangerous, like in Chapter 4 with all the Cavaliers, or Chapter 7, when again with all the Cavaliers and Zealot and Trek, you know, being in danger. Having Marcus there to save you from dangerous enemies, either killing an enemy with the Halberd or with the Silver Lance, or if he's just killing things with an Iron Axe, whatever he's doing, it's going to be so helpful to you that you should always use him when he's there. And at some point you might feel, okay, Marcus is not doubling anymore, he's not one-running things anymore, I have other units I can deploy that would do more in his stead. You should do that. He's going to feel like he falls off a bit sooner than I think you should bench him. I think he's a better deploy than, just as an example, like a 5-move unit that can't kill things on his own. I think an 8-move unit that can't kill things on his own is always going to be better than that. Just random examples like Lot, like OJ, what else? Roy, but you can't bench him. People like that. Generally, Marcus is going to be better because he can still, even if he's not fighting very well, he's probably still fighting on par with them. And even if he wasn't, he can still do rescue drops. He can still pull people out of dangerous situations. Maybe you're playing a Fog of War map and you didn't see an enemy coming, and they are now in your camp, and you got to get rid of them somehow. You can, or they're so close to you, you got to get out with a rescue somehow. Marcus can do that for you, so he can save you from having units die in Iron Man. I think that is helpful. So yeah, that's why Marcus is helpful to have around for, I think, a couple chapters past Chapter 10 is good. Usually, Chapter 13 I usually field Marcus. Chapter 14 is a desert. I usually don't field him for that one. And then you kind of start getting to a point where maybe it's not worth fielding anymore. But I've seen people field him like all the way through the Ilya arc, so it's really up to you. It also depends on like who's died on your team and who's like still alive. So that's Marcus, but there's a couple more like that. You got Deke, who is really good in his joining chapter because he can sit on a fort and fight a bunch of fighters, and then every map from there on out, it's going to get a little bit worse, but he will always be like better than Roy at the very least, and I guess that's a good benchmark. It's like, is this unit better than Roy? It's more like he's just good to have for a while, but if you're going to give the first hero crest to Rutger, then he has to wait to promote until later, and if you give him the first hero crest, then he doesn't get as much out of it as Rutger, so it's not recommended. It kind of works, like having an early promoted Deke in like chapter 8 or 9 is perfectly fine, so if your Rutger died, it can be a good replacement, but generally Deke kind of stops doubling and stops hitting reliably for a while. If you promote him early, it might last a bit longer, but generally he's going to stop being as good as he was in Chapter 2 very soon, and it's very intuitive when you should probably bench him. A big drawback to him is that when Deke promotes, it is harder to carry him around because his con grows so much. I think a promoted Paladin cannot carry a promoted Deke from the top of my head. So that's when you start having a 6-move unit that might not make it to combat before your Miladies and your Percivals and your Allens start getting to combat. And at that point, you might end a map with like, okay, I had a Deke promoted, I could have fought the enemies if I reached them. But if he doesn't reach them, then what does it matter? Now, if you're playing in a way where a 6-move unit still reaches combat, then by all means keep using him, of course. If you like actually train him, maybe if you got lucky with the speed level ups, like sure, keep using him. This is kind of based off like how he would turn out on average. But if your Deke gets RNG blessed, keep using him. Like, enjoy that, King. It's good. Speed growth isn't very good. I think it's 30%. But, you know, you could sometimes hit a 30% growth and get real good. Now we got Marcus from Walmart, aka Zealot. Slightly better base stats, but joins a bit later. Does have the weapon ranks to compete. My voice is like cracking. But when he joins, he's generally capable of doubling. His skill is a bit worse, so his hit rate's going to be a bit worse than Marcus's. But if you got good enough accuracy with Zealot on something, chances are he's doing more damage than Marcus or is able to double where Marcus maybe couldn't. You probably feel both for a while, and then he has like a similar expiration date to Marcus, maybe 1 or 2 chapters after him. Later on, depending on how your Marcus leveled up, yes, Marcus can level up stats. Depending on how that how that went for them, one of them might have significantly better stats than the other. Use your own judgment, use your own critical thinking skills. I'm sure you got some. But yeah, Zealot has similar utility to Marcus, so I'm not going to repeat myself on that one. Then we got a couple of pre-promotes that I think are all very similar. I'm just going to like put them all here. That is units that like join on the Western Isles and are pretty good for a while. And that's these 3. Echidna, Bartray, and Klein. Of course, you can't get both Echidna and Bartray, but they join around the same time. And then Klein is always in that arc too. So these are pre-promoted units that join in the Western Isles that start off really, really strong. Echidna, when she joins, can double enemies and usually kill them, depending on what weapon you're using. Her constitution is a bit too low, so she gets weighed down by things like most axes, and then even Killing Edge, I think, weighs her down by 1 or 2 points. But she's so fast, she's still fine. Her main drawback is having low luck, so she can get crit by enemies, but usually when she's like doing a combat forecast on an enemy, it results in lethal, or she has like a chance to crit them, like 2 chances to get like a 40% crit on them, because her skill is like really good. Bartray is more like, I can one-shot some things, because I got like A rank axes, D rank bows, so I can one-shot flyers with the bow, or I can one-shot a mage with the silver axe maybe, things like that. Or you can just hit one guy really, really hard. Even if he doesn't kill, it sets up for someone else. And then Klein mostly just one-shots flyers with a silver bow, or you can chip an enemy with an iron bow or a long bow. Stuff like that. Really good against ranged enemies. There's people like the warrior in chapter 12 that can hit you through the wall with a hand axe. He's very good against him. He's also good against enemy archers that are stuck behind a wall. You're trying to get, because he has accurate 2 range. That's the main thing about Klein. Accurate, but still powerful 2 range. Hand axes and javelins not very good in FE6 without a lot of hit bonuses through from supports. But Klein can just silver bow an enemy from range and do well. Sometimes archers can counter an enemy phase. It's amazing, but it happens sometimes. So that's what Klein is helpful for. How long does this last? Kind of like similar to like Deke, with the having a move unit with only 6 move and lackluster growth means that at some point these units will A, stop reaching enemies if you are using a lot of high mobility units and you're not ferrying them to the front line, and B, their stats might not hold up. Bartray doesn't double. Echidna at some points runs into attack power issues where she needs like multiple crits to kill, stuff like that. And Klein, snipers just have a lot of issues in a game where those often are not countering on an enemy phase, and at some point you're also going to have like a trained bow user with a mount maybe that are just better than that. So they'll stop being useful at some point. But if they get lucky, or if you're really enjoying using them, you can keep using them, sure. But usually they will not turn out as good as the training projects, which is what we're getting into next. So the training projects are units that join at some point and they need level ups to get good. They don't start off strong enough like the other units to stay good like they are. They need some level ups. And the key with the good training project is that these units are on average very good, but if they're getting RNG screwed, you shouldn't feel bad about benching them. You should use them for a couple levels, feed them some kills, if you feel like using them long term, of course. And then if they are really good, or if they're turning out okay, then you should keep using them. But if they're not really performing very well, you should feel free to bench them for someone else, because you're probably going to get some kind of way to replace them. We'll get into replacements later. But a good example of this is Alan and Lance, aka Alans. They are very, very similar units, but they are really good, and I contemplated putting them best just because they have the support bonuses with themselves and with Roy. If they can get +5 attack and +25 avoid and plus a lot of hit and crit from Roy's fire affinity, Alan's fire affinity, and Lance's anima affinity, then they're almost always going to be very, very good. But one of them is probably going to be better, and that's the one I would recommend promoting with the Chapter 8 Night Crest. The other one can wait, or not promote at all, or even be benched. You can't get by with just, like, say, Alan and Roy supporting an A support and Lance being on the bench and not doing anything. And maybe you even support Roy with someone else, because he's got, like, a whole harem of people he can support instead of Lance afterwards. You can even kill off Lance if you want to, or vice versa. If your Alan turns out very bad, but your Lance turns out very good, you can use him instead. Their bases and growth Obviously, Alan's more strength-based and Lance is more speed-based. Sometimes they turn out in a way where you start to kind of question that. That's usually the sign that one of them is blessed and one of them is not blessed. But usually Lance will start doubling sooner, and Alan will start like 2-hitting people sooner. And if Alan gets a double, then he's usually better than Lance. And if he doesn't, but Lance does, then Lance is better. It's kind of like that. But it's FE6, units can turn out good or bad depending on the level ups all the time. So pick one, usually, or keep using both if they're both performing well for you, but just know only one can promote for a very long time. But they're very, 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 very good, probably the best training projects in the game, and you should almost always start by using them, because nobody else who joins very early is worth investing a lot of experience into anyway. There's a couple units that are like fine, but these are by far the best potential units that you have at this point in the game. So training them is nice, and with these support bonuses, they're also very safe in Iron Man. I haven't emphasized this not as much as I did in FE7 Iron Man, but in an Iron Man, like, I care most about units that can stay alive. I want my units to be able to enemy phase and not die, because that means I can keep using them. And an enemy that kills one of my units also is alive in my camp and probably at like 4 HP. So I want that unit to survive and hit back. So having units that die is bad. Plus, at some point you run out of units and your void dies. So Alan and Lance, they don't have a lot of defense. They have like fine bulk, but they're going to get a lot of avoid from supports. And even if they don't have support avoid, they have weapon triangle advantage and they have reasonable bulk. So it's nice to have a unit that can take hits. This is also why I really like Marcus and also why I really like Milady. And why I like Percival. They don't die that easily. And not dying is good. It gets you through the day. I would recommend not dying. So that's why I think those are especially helpful for an Iron Man. If you do want to get supports, either just play not that fast and just end turn together, or like ends their turn next to each other when you can, and you'll get their C and B supports probably. But if you really want to like go ham and you don't care about spamming end turn, put them next to each other and spam end turn. Try to only have people adjacent in a chapter that you want to build supports between. So have Alan and Lance enter turn next to each other, have Roy enter turn next to either of them, and don't have, for example, Walt end his turn next to Alan and Lance, because he will gain support points with them. And there's a limit of how many support points a character can get per chapter. And if you, I think that limit is, top of my head, 80 points, if not wrong. It's enough to get a C, and maybe even multiple C, or even from like C to B sometimes, if you really micromanage it. You don't have to micromanage it to win the game, but if you want to do something, if you're trying to think of like, where do I put my Volt? After everyone's moved, where do I put my Volt? Try to not put them next to the Cavs if you can. Is what I would recommend. Especially if you're planning on end turn spamming. If you do micromanage it really seriously, you can get their A support online by like chapter 4, and that will make chapter 4 a lot easier. Chapter 4, the chapter where Rutger and Clarine exist, is probably the hardest hurdle to overcome in an Iron Man, besides chapter 7 and maybe the desert. So having that support online really, really helps with that. It is a little bit cheesy. I don't recommend doing it if you think you would rather have like a huge challenge, but if you want to make it easier on yourself, that is one way you can make it easier on yourself. So that's Alan's. Now we got Sin over here, another really good training project. He's the guy I kind of alluded to when I was talking about Klein not being the best long-term, because Sin is the best long-term bow user. Really, really good stats. It's not a coincidence that he gets hardwood bonuses. That's one of the reasons his bases are good. Even in normal mode, though, they're still like really, really fantastic. He doubles things. He doesn't quite run around a base, but if you train him to get killer bow access, then he can just bank on a crit, or snipe a wyvern down, or just two-shot some frailer enemy types, and eventually he'll even two-shot like enemy cavaliers or something, depending on what weapon you're using and what level we're talking about. The big drawback to Sin, of course, besides the fact that he's a bow user, so, you know, can't counter an enemy phase, but, you know, he gets enough options to make up for it. The real issue is the route split, where if you train Sin, but not your Pegasus Knights, then you're probably going to go with the Sakai route, and Sakai route is harder. If you want to experience Sakai route, to flex like Altissimo, or just to be, you know, for a challenge where you haven't seen the route before, that's not a problem for you. If that is a problem for you, then you're probably going to have to train Sin alongside one of the Pegasus Knights, and that's not as bad as it might seem. I think the Pegasus Knights in this game are decent. You just have to keep track of their experience a little bit. If one of them dies, the XP that they gain is not lost, it's still tracked by the game, and it goes by the total amount of XP gained between all Pegasus Knights, so Thea and Shanna, and all the Nomads, so Sin and Sue. So make sure to keep track of it, and if they die, make like a mental note or a physical note on how much XP they had, so you know how much you have to train the other one to go the different route. Ilya route is easier. I would recommend Ilya to anyone who's trying to clear an Iron Man. Speaking of that, I would also recommend keeping Zealot alive at all costs if you want to go to Ilya, because he's required for that. If I'm not mistaken. Okay, so if you want Ilya route and the true ending, you need to keep Zealot alive, because without him you cannot get 20x in Ilya. You need him and Yuno alive. So protect him in Chapter 7. You can let Trek die if you want to, you can let Noah die if you want to, but keep Zealot alive. It's not too hard because he's the hardest one to kill for the enemies, but if he's like running off on his own and as a green guy, you probably want to think of a way to stop him. In fact, you probably want to prevent that. I forgot to mention that at his entry. But yeah, keep in mind the rest of it with Sin, and then he's really, really good. I don't know if I should really dock him points for taking you to a harder route. It's not like Sakei's unbeatable, but it is a lot harder to hit fast enemy nomads that you often cannot counter with reliable attacks on enemy phase than it is to deal with Pegasus Knights that weigh themselves down with steel lances and don't get the terrain avoid, and often just use one range weaponry and are weak to bows and have worse stats. And also the map design of Ilya, while not like super friendly, is still friendlier than Sakei overall. So yeah, watch out. That said, if you have trained Sin, then you do have a unit that can counter enemy nomads somewhat reliably, so at least that problem kind of takes care of itself. Next good training project is Gonzalez. I think Gonzalez is very, very powerful. Very hit or miss, obviously, no pun intended. A lot of strength, a lot of HP, enough speed to double, definitely enough speed to double, and quick enough promotion where you can make it work. He needs a hero crest, but if you heeded my advice so far, then you've used one on Rutger, and then the other one can go to Gonzalez. That's the plan. Either joins level 5 or level 12 with the exact same base stats. The level 12 one you can instant promote. I've never tried it. It's probably decent to promote him early because he gets like a +5 skill bonus, which is huge, and a +30 crit bonus, which is massive. And it just lets him like double intuit kill faster. But I'm always a little bit greedy for stats on Gonzalez, so even if I'm getting the level 12 one, I'm probably still trying to give him a couple levels before promoting. Level 5 one, you're probably fine to train him to 10 and promote, but if you want to go a little bit further, that's fine too. Unpromoted Gonzalez has some trouble. He doesn't hit. Like, you can have like sub 50 hit rate sometimes if you're fighting something not even that dodgy. Hitting enemies in terrain is like just a no-go, and he doesn't always double things when he joins either, even with the hard mode bonuses that he gets. So he's got some issues at base, but once he's good, the great thing I love about Gonzalez is that you can put him on really heavy terrain like peaks or mountains, and if you fight like a fleet of enemy wyverns, you can just sit there and kill them all with a killer axe, and you just don't have to worry about them. And other than maybe actually for wyverns, they're going to have 0 hit on him. He's never going to get a hit, he's never going to die. And then he can just take his time. It's okay if he misses, because what are they going to do to him? Miss him again? Like, he's totally fine. So it's a good training project, but definitely some reliability issues. If you're trying to get rid of like 5 enemies in your camp and one of them is assigned to Gonzalez and Gonzalez misses, that can definitely give you a little bit of a headache. So not a unit without drawbacks, but definitely one I would recommend. Next up is Lu. I think he is a good training project too, especially if you want to use like all the divine weapons. Then this is a good candidate to give the animatone to for Blaze. Lu joins very, very early, so it's easier to give him experience. He can be both a good chip bot for your other units because he's reliable, and you know he's not going to miss, and he can attack from like all kinds of different spaces because he has 1 or 2 range, and you know fire's going to hit because it's got a lot of accuracy. But he can also just finish off enemies just as simply and get the XP to himself. That usually means someone else has to take a counter for him. But generally, it's not that hard to raise Lu because he just joins in Chapter 3. You gotta keep him alive. There are some enemies that can one-shot him, like Steel Axe Bandits early on, that you gotta be really careful of. Nomads can double him right away, so it's very, very fragile. But once he promotes, he gets a big bonus to his magic, which is otherwise pretty mediocre. He's fast enough to double, and he hits enemy res, which is very low. Fire is very accurate. Air Caliber is good against Pegasus Knights and Wyverns, which are very, very common. And then sometimes if you need a little bit more power, you can sacrifice a bit of accuracy and use like Thunder or Elfire or something like that. And he's fine. Not all Lus end up being able to like 2-shot enemies reliably, but most Lus do. And even if he's not 2-shotting, he's often still just on par with your other units offense-wise, so he can combine for kills with others. And he gets stabs after promoting, which, I mean, it's only E-rank stabs, but it's kind of useful to have. We'll get into those in a minute. You can be an extra healer if you like run out of healers because they died, and they can die easily. So that's all kind of utility that Lu provides. And then Forblaze is just kind of nice to have. It's one of the earlier S-rank weapons that you get after Durandal and Armads. So it's nice to have a person that can just use that all game long. Final good training project, this one may surprise you, is Roy. I recommend training Roy in an FE6 Iron Man, even though you're putting your Lord in danger, which is something I was not recommending for FE7. I think it's overall less dangerous for you if you train Roy. And the reason is, early on, everyone has to fight anyway to kill the enemies, especially in a chapter like Chapter 4, but even the chapters 1 before that. There's going to be a lot of enemies around it where like weakened by Marcus and someone has to kill them. And you just don't have that many units that are doing anything with that experience. You got Alan, you got Lance, you might have Lou if you're into him, and Lou doesn't even join right away. And sometimes there's just more enemies than there's long-term training projects. Might as well get those kills to Roy. Might as well train him up, make sure he doesn't die to a single bolting or purge or some other hazard that is around. You probably should be keeping him back when enemies start being too strong for Roy because he promotes so late. He's never going to be your best combat unit ever, but early on is when he's the least behind the other units in terms of how good his combat is, and you might as well take advantage of that smaller gap. Have him rapier a cav somewhere, it's effective, you might as well. Just have him kill a bandit that Marcus reduced to like 3 HP. No reason not to. In fact, early on, when the gap is smaller, it might even be more important to raise Roy than it is to train Alan and Lance, because they're probably going to be fine in the long term, and they don't need every drop of XP they get, but opportunities to train Roy are a lot rarer. He is in every chapter, of course, but he is not easy to train later on because he's going to be held back by all the drawbacks you can think of: late promotion, 5 move, sword lock, low stats. Like, all these are problems later on, but they're smaller problems early on. So train him when you can. And this will allow him to, for example, if you're in a bad spot in the chapter because there's a lot of reinforcements around you, and you gotta seize quickly, this allows you to put Roy in positions where he doesn't die but can still seize the throne next turn, whereas an untrained Roy might just die in one hit to an enemy. Stuff like that is preventable. Also, it makes it easier to make it to like put him near the enemies, but not like quite super far in, to give support bonuses to Alan or Lance if you did that. If you put him in range of like 1 or 2 enemies, but you know he survives, that is a big difference maker. And it also makes it easier to kill things again for himself, so he snowballs and becomes better. He's not great long term, of course. Like, he doesn't actually become good until he promotes, but when he promotes, he is also good. And he will be better if you gave him a couple levels along the way. Don't feel obliged to train Roy to 20. That can take a long time, but you have until the end of chapter 21X to do it, so it really only needs like 1 level per chapter max. I would get more early on and less later on. There's like a lot of chapters later on where I find Roy gets like maybe 30 XP per chapter, so get him more early on and it will average out to like 1 per chapter, and that is all he needs to cap out if you want him to. But if he ends up being like 17 or 16 or 15 or even lower, that's fine. All he needs is like a little bit of speed to double mana keys with the Binding Blade, and that's all he needs. Next category is for, well, it's utility, staff utility, Staves. I had these up here in FE7 too, and in FE6 it's arguably even more important, maybe equally important. You gotta have a way to heal your units if they get damaged, because using vulneraries is very inefficient. You don't get many elixirs in this game. Even if you did, they are kind of expensive and they're gonna be somewhat rare. And then also, you want to be able to use your unit's turn to attack or rescue or drop or something useful. You don't want to use it to just use a vulnerary to heal for 10 HP. And then you got the status staves that are so common in FE6 late game. Sleep, Berserk, Silence, they're just super annoying. And you want to have multiple ways to cure them, because generally in FE6, enemy status staves, they come in bigger numbers. They will also, there's always that formation of like 3 sages or bishops or druids with like 1 of each status staff. And the status staff with Silence is going to go for your healer probably, so you want to have a way to cure that, so that they can then cure your Berserk unit or your Slep unit, or both. With that in mind, I'm going to put all the staff users here that just have good staff rank, and I'll briefly touch on like each of them, but generally just the role of a staff unit is going to be the same across them. So we got Saul, Nime, and Cecilia, and Yoder. All of them do roughly the same thing at different points in the game with different starting like stats. Emma's the first one, and she's just mostly about that healing like action economy thing. I healed Lance because Lance took damage, and now Lance can attack again instead of having to use a phone on himself. That's what Ellen does. It's very useful. She doesn't heal that much HP early on, but you get a mend in chapter 3, and that's going to patch that right up. This also fixes Clarine's similar problem, because they both have really low base magic. Clarine is on a horse, so in addition to the staff utility with healing, she also provides rescue utility if you want that instead for a turn. Usually I prefer to heal because it gives Clarine XP, and it doesn't take up more actions to do the rescue and the drop. So generally I prefer to heal units to get them out of trouble rather than rescue them. But sometimes rescuing is useful, and you want to be able to use that. In addition, Clarine can also support with Rutger. They have a relatively fast support. They also have a little triangle going on with Deke. That does take a lot longer to build than like the Alan support or like Roy to Lena. Those are like a bit further, but if you're doing end turn spam, this is a good way to get max out the Void and max out credit on Rutger, for example, which is very useful still. Gotta keep Clarine safe though. If you promote Clarine, she's more of a combat unit than like Ellen is, because her speed is pretty good and she can become a real dodge tank. That's how I used to think that Clarine was supposed to be played. I think it's generally better to just have her heal for the whole game, but you can do combat Clarine if you're into that. She can reduce enemy hit rates to 0 if she's supported by Deke and Rutger, and it's really fun. And, you know, enemy res is so low that she'll probably like 3 or 4 shot the enemies at least, maybe even 2 shot some of the weaker ones. So it's pretty fun, but it's mostly about the staff utility I just mentioned, and having a horse. Cecilia also has the horse, by the way, so whatever I said about that also goes for her. Saul is like Ellen Plus, has C rank staves at base, so he's an easier time reaching the higher staff ranks. If you're using a healer full time, like you're doing all the healing with one person, then Ellen will probably reach the staff rank that you want Saul to reach anyway. She might even be at C rank stabs, depending on how slow you played, when Saul joins, or be close enough that there's not a very big difference. Usually in like more efficient context, the fact that Saul starts on a whole rank ahead of Ellen is a big deal. But here I think it's less of a big deal. So if you like Ellen more, like feel free to use Ellen instead, or Clarine, it doesn't really matter. They have D, Saul is C, which is 50 uses of heal or mend or any other staff away. All FE6 staffs just give 1 weapon XP, which is why it's usually considered a big deal that Saul's 50 ahead. But in Iron Man, if you play slowly enough, it really doesn't make a big difference. But if they died, you'd probably want to use Saul, because he can heal people for a lot. And he can use Barrier at base if you are into that. You get a Barrier, I think, in Chapter 7. I don't think you get Pure Waters by that point. So this is a nice way to make someone more mage resistant, and a good way to get staff XP on him. You can also use Torch at base to light up an area, which, I mean, it doesn't light up a whole lot in FE6 because you can't target a square with it. It just lights up around him, so it doesn't reveal that much. But it's still better than nothing, and there's not that many Fog of War maps, so you probably want to spam Torch when you can, up to like a couple uses left for the remaining Fog of War chapters. Like, I think it's 14 and 12x and 21x, and that's it. On that, I have some Ilium maps that have Fog of War too, so probably want to space them out. You only get like 1 Torch staff with 10 uses, I think. Cecilia actually joins earlier, so I'm gonna put her here next. I made a whole waifu video on Cecilia explaining why she's way better than her initial impression suggests. But the TLDR is, yeah, she dies to Zephiel in a cutscene, and yeah, the desert only gives her 2 move. But after that, you have an 8 move unit that can do chip damage with her fire or caliber tomes, or do all the staff utility that I mentioned for Saul, C rank staffs, so mend someone, recover someone, restore, of course, very important, and maybe reach B rank staff and get Physic if you are able to get 50 heals in with her. Like, fantastic utility unit, just don't put her in enemy range and she'll be fine. And it's just really good to get this for free too, because you don't get that you don't get that many guiding rings. And then Nime is really high magic kind of staff user, so she's great at like physicking people from like across the map. She's good at, well, she's not good at surviving, but if you give her an angelic rope, she can be, because then you can use Nosferatu. Good candidate for a body ring if you're into that, because then she can double more with Flux and Nosferatu and not get doubled in return. Although if she's in range of an enemy like that, maybe just don't put her in range of that. But yeah, can reach Apocalypse rank to you equip that, get +5 magic, warp people even further away. She's the first unit you get with A rank staves at base, so she's capable of using warp and rescue, and grabs people or pushes people like really far away with that, if you like that. Generally for Iron Mans, I don't care too much for warp usage, but there might be some maps where you have to do an emergency, like kill boss, warp Roy C's kind of play to get out of trouble. That is legit. Generally just Nime being free and being able to like do all that is just super nice. Also, I guess Fortify, not really a thing in this game. I think this applies more to Yoder. Yoder joins with S rank stats, which is even better. His magic is lower than Nime, so it doesn't warp as far or heal as much, but you usually heal enough anyway. But he joins with S rank staves and Saint Staff, which is just a global heal plus status restore. I mentioned before how you really want to make sure that your units don't get status going into enemy phase. You don't want to like have a berserk unit be like that. And sometimes units get berserk that you don't expect to, and your restore users cannot reach them. that's where the Saint Staff just comes in and heals them and just says, okay, this problem is now gone. Sometimes multiple units get slept, sometimes a unit gets silenced, and then you can't restore the person you thought you were going to be able to restore. Saint Staff solves all those issues. It's really, really good. Yoda obviously isn't around a whole lot, so if this was a tier list, he'd be like more down here. But because this is about what category he's in, he's a good staff user, and that's why he belongs here. So if you have any of these units in your roster currently, look at what chapter it is. If it's like chapter 3 or like chapter 5, you probably want to use the Ellen. If it's like chapter 15, you probably want to use Cecilia. If it's like chapter 20 something, probably want to use Nime and Yoder. Maybe multiple of these, depending on how many staff users you need. Generally, a good rule of thumb is probably count the amount of enemy staff users that are like berserking and silencing you, and deploy roughly that many restore users. That's generally a good way to get out of trouble. And then you have Laram or Elfin as a bonus. Then we have a very easy one. We got Thieves. This game has a lot of treasure that you want to steal, and you got to deploy someone to get them. So we'll have Chad, Astor, and Kath. You don't need a thief to get some treasure, because you can buy door keys and chest keys, but those take up inventory slots of units, so whether you field them probably depends on whether you value the inventory slots of your good units, or if you value deployment slots more. If you have stealables, then you can't substitute that with anything but a thief. You can't steal something using a door key, so you will probably want to field them if there's something valuable to steal, like the Delphi shield, or some gems, or maybe an elixir somewhere, or lockpicks from Kath herself. But yeah, you probably want to bring a thief. This is probably too self-explanatory for me to go into real depth. One thing I do want to talk about real quick is Kath and her many appearances and whether I should kill her or recruit her. I have played the game enough to where I can reliably not kill Kath and not care. The benefit of killing Kath when she first appears in chapter 6 is that she doesn't show up with enemy thieves in later chapters. So in a chapter like chapter 8, where you're kind of supposed to hurry up to stop her from stealing things, I think she doesn't appear to contest the treasure that you're going for if you kill her in chapter 6. I don't think it's too hard of a deadline to meet, but if you are finding it hard to move fast enough to do so, I guess you can kill Kath because you already have 2 thieves. For Iron Man's, the big benefit of having multiple thieves is that if one of them dies, you still have the other ones, so you're not locked out of the other treasure. And killing Kath robs you of that, and also she's honestly not that hard to beat, and she can be a source of lockpicks, which can be sold to the shop, and then you can buy other things, like boots, for example, in the chapter 21 secret shop. So I like keeping Kath alive, but if you're really struggling with like meeting her deadlines, I guess you can kill her off. I wouldn't recommend it though. But yeah, thieves, fuel them if there's treasure to steal. Or, I mean, Astolfo is a decent combat unit in the Western Isles, so if you don't have any units better than he is, then I'll probably fuel him. Next is more utility, actually. It's the wings. And this is units that I would deploy if I thought I was getting a significant benefit out of the fact that they can fly. So, behold, as I put in Shanna, Thea, Yuno, and Aziz. They're in a different category from Milady because they're not as good as combat. Milady is like up high because she can both do combat and fly, and her stats are just that good. If Milady didn't fly but still had those stats, I would still put her up here. These units are here because I value them for their wings, and then they have significant drawbacks beyond that make me put them a little bit in a different category than like Milady. Because the Pegasus Knights are pretty frail, and then Aziz is kind of slow and joins with like a lot of need for experience. Or rather, well, they need help. They need help, is basically the point. So Shanna joins very early on. I have multiple videos talking about Shanna and why exactly her stats are a bit problematic, but not so problematic that she's like hard to use. I need to put this in a more succinct way, but it's really hard to explain Shanna in only a couple sentences. Basically, Shanna joins with somewhat low strength, kind of low bulk, HP and defense, an arrow weakness, weapon challenge disadvantage, and all that seems really bad against axe users, especially, and bow users, and not enough speed to double the sword users, and even soldiers she doesn't want to kill. But if you train Shanna, first of all, you can use Sin and go to Ilya. That is a practical reason to use her. Second of all, if you get her to like 12 and then promote her to Pegasus Knight, or even 11, or even 10, then you get a Falcon Knight for the Western Isles, and you have an 8-move unit that can double enemy axe users and dodge them pretty easily if she's using an Iron Sword. And that is super, super helpful, and I would always recommend it. But I know it can be tough in Iron Man to stay alive and feed kills to Shanna when her strength is kind of bad. So I understand why people would have trouble with that. And you could try using Thea instead. You just kind of move the problem to a later chapter, where instead you have a unit that has like better strength but worse speed, relatively bad bulk still, D-rank lances, no access to, say, an axe reaver to fight axe users with, a couple levels from promotion still, but she can one-on cast with the Horse Slayer, so it's not all bad. I would recommend training one of these up to 10 and promoting them probably if you want to have some flying utility. Flying utility is great for efficiency tier lists. It's not as it's not nearly required for Iron Man. You don't need this. But for example, if you're going to chapter 14, are you going to deploy? What's like a good example from here? Are you going to deploy Deke, a character that can move like 2 squares per turn, and if he's promoted, he might fight like a couple of enemies. But once he's like locked to an area of the desert, he's probably not getting out of there without the help of someone else. So are you going to deploy him and have him do like one thing and that's it? Or are you going to deploy someone who can ferry your Thief around, ferry Roy around, ferry your Dancer around, even if they don't get any training whatsoever? Just a 7-move Pegasus Knight. Those are just so helpful to have for the desert if they don't do anything. They're more helpful if you have knowledge of the map, know where to go, because the Fog of War makes it so that you can't just bump into an enemy and die if you do it wrong. So if you're using maps, like if you're looking them up online, or if you just know the game well enough, then you can use these very easily to circumvent a lot of the troubles of the desert. But if you don't, I perfectly understand keeping them on the bench and just taking it slow. You don't need them to make it to the guiding chapter in time. You don't need them to beat the chapter in, 20 turns, 25 turns. That is okay. You don't need them for that, but I find them very helpful to have around. So whichever one of these you have at that point, whether that is higher level, I would field them for that chapter. And there's a couple of other things, like Shanna can drop Rutger further in several points of the game before Milady joins. Once Milady joins, the utility kind of vanishes. There's still some of it, like you can use Shanna to drop Rutger while Milady goes to do something else because she's self-sufficient, whereas Shanna is not. She's just there to taxi Rutger around. I find it helpful to do, but a lot of it has to do with what I already know with the maps, and I know where I can go with these units without them dying. But if an enemy sees them, they're probably dead, especially if they're holding Rutger. So I find it helpful to get objectives, to push up further into the map, to kill enemies before they become a problem. But if you don't have that kind of knowledge, then it can be kind of hard to justify fielding those or training these. I don't think training them is too bad, but I recognize that for every player might not be the same. Also, Chapter 21 is the chapter after Yuno joins in Ilia route. That is a map I would definitely recommend fielding Yuno for, just to have her either visit the secret shop to buy boots, or ferry someone across the mountain to avoid reinforcement zones. You have so many deployment slots in this chapter. I don't think you ever have 16 units that are better than Yuno at this point in the game. And I think even if there is one that has like higher stats, chances are they're not going to do a whole lot of combat, not enough to justify fielding over an 8-move unit that can rescue drop units. So even though unit stats are absolute beyond trash, like super garbage, she's still better to deploy than like Zealot or maybe even, would it be Klein? Like, I think I would deploy Yuno over Klein in that chapter, which sounds silly, but I don't think Klein at base can one-shot everything in that chapter. So Yuno at that point provides something that Klein does not. Then you got Zeus. Zeus is a bit different because while the Pegasus Knights just have durability trouble and strength issues, Zeus's issues are skill and speed, but he does have really good HP, strength, and defense. He has good bulk. So if you can get him to double somehow, or if you're okay with a guy that doesn't double, but just does a lot of damage in one hit, then that's okay. He can use like a Killer Lance and maybe 2-shot the enemy. But he's got to get there first. He doesn't have the ability to use Killer Lance at base. He has D Lances, which is unfortunate. Like, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. I actually need to check that, because I said that with such confidence, but what if I'm actually wrong? Yeah, he has D Lances. Okay, I remember correctly. That's like the same rank as Dia had like 5 chapters back. It's kind of sad. But yeah, he's fine in 2 ways. You could either promote him at 10 and just have a decently bulky guy that can fly somewhere and probably survive. If you're in like Ilia and you're using both Zeus and Milady, a big trouble is always who gets a Delphi shield. Problem in both Sakai and Ilia actually. But in Ilia the problem is ballistas, whereas in Sakai it's nomads. One of them is going to have like a lot of trouble surviving bow users, and that's going to suck. But if you keep him out of range of bow users and you have Milady fight, you're probably okay. You can have him drop a combat unit across a river or a mountain range, and that can be kind of helpful. And he's not going to melt like someone like base level Shanna is. So in that sense, he's better. You can also treat him as like an actual combat unit, train him further to like 15 or 20 if you have the patience for that. I find it hard to do so in a time frame where it makes a difference, because even if you train Zeus all the way to 20 and promote him, chances are you still won't have the speed to double. You might have speed wings to spare, in which case he might be able to do it, but generally Zeus is just a guy that is not reliably doubling things. Might want to kill with like a Horse Slayer or a Kill Lance crit, but the speed issue is real, and also he can miss. I'm sure long-time watchers know how much Zeus can miss, and it's bad. It's really annoying when you rely on him to hit and he doesn't. So that's another problem he has. But yeah, if you have ever a need for flyers, for wings, then these are nice units to field. But I imagine for a lot of players that are using this kind of tier list as a guide, that might not be the case for them. The next tier is for one unit specifically, and that's for Fa. And since we're in the same category as the wings category, I'm going to call this one Chicken Wings. Fa is a very special unit. She deserves her own category. Fa can do a couple of things, and depending on how exactly you want to spend her Dragonstone uses, you do a couple more things. The thing that I like Fa the most for is status staff distraction. If you put her in the bottom of your deployment order, then the enemy will prioritize that slot when they have her in range, even if they have other targets that have much less resistance. Fa has a lot of res thanks to her Dragonstone, so if an enemy tries to sleep her or like berserk her, they'll probably miss. You should have a restore user ready just to make sure that if she does get hit, then you can cure her. But oftentimes she'll just waste the enemy stat staff users by herself, and that's really, really helpful. Only works if she's bottom deployment order. Otherwise, they'll go for whoever is like in the actual bottom of the deployment order. It's very silly how it works. She can also distract long-range tomes. Her HP is very low, res is very high, but the enemy is going to look at, okay, how much HP does my target end up with after I hit them with this bolting? And if they hit Fa with a 0 damage bolting, she's going to end up at like 16 HP, which they think is low. It's like our full HP, but they don't realize that. So they can target Fa over someone with less res. Like they might target Fa over someone like, I don't know, Sin or Lance or Alan. So Fa is really helpful against mages that you can't kill yet, but that are still able to do something to you, is the summary here. If you train Fa, if you have her get kills, and she grows resistance, or maybe if you barrier her, there's a chance she ends up out of range of that status staff utility, because they will no longer see hit rate. They do need to have at least 0 hit on Fa from the square that they start at. At least that's how they work in FE7. I'm pretty sure that is identical to how it works in FE6. So if you train Fa as a combat unit because you want her to be good at killing things, then you might lose this utility. But what you gain is, first of all, you get a chicken dragon that breathes on people and they die. She can like learn to one-shot mages. She's force deployed in one of the final maps, and you can have her kill enemy dragons there, and that can be helpful to have. You don't need that, but if you want that, then it kind of conflicts with having to keep her at base for the stat staff utility. That's a choice you have to make. I can't make it for you. I don't even want to make it for you. The intention is not to make it for you. But those are two things that she can do that are kind of incompatible with each other, but they're both good. They can both be beneficial. And yeah, like I said, she's force deployed in the final chapter for the true ending, so you might want to train her out of principle for that. I don't think you need to. I personally don't, but I know that a lot of players like to have everyone who's just going to be in the final chapter trained up, so that might be why they want to do it. That's Fa. She's very special, and she's a cute girl. You got to protect her. Okay, next up, a couple of like weird categories. This is what I'm gonna call mid-training projects. These are not units that are as good as the good training projects, but they're also not going to be very functional if you don't train them. So these are units that I might recommend training if you're looking for something different, or you're okay with doing something worse than what's in here. Maybe you're looking to spice up your playthrough a bit. Maybe you just don't like using good units for some reason. That's why I would use these units. So I got Sue, I got Lot, and I got Ray. So these are units that I think are fine, but not fantastic. Sue as a good class, like having a 7 move bow unit is nice. Just the speed is good, but almost none of her other stats are. They're kind of garbo. So for most playthroughs, I field Sue for one chapter, chapter 7, and then maybe a couple ones after that, and then I bench her because her stats are just kind of underwhelming. But if she turns out good, then why not use her? The chances that she turns out better than Sin are very low. Maybe you want to use both. Maybe you just really want to go to Sakai and have 2 competent nomads. That could be one reason to use Sue a lot. If her speed turns out good enough, if you get like killer bow rank, you start like critting enemies left and right, that can be fun. That's alright. But just watch out because her HP is not very good, her defense is not very good, and her strength especially, she needs to grow some strength to become good enough to kill things. If she doesn't grow strength, she's in big trouble. But hey, bow users can kill Wyvern Riders and Pegasus Knights. You don't fight that many Pegasus Knights if you go with Sakai, but generally speaking, having a competent bow user is nice. Lot is an X guy. This guy's got like middling stats all around. He's got the highest defense growth in the game, I think, at like 40%, besides maybe like an Armor Knight somewhere. But not much else going for him. The bases are just kind of mid all around. But if he gets like a couple of good level ups early on, then maybe this is the fun guy that spices up your playthrough and starts winning chapters. He does one round in his joining chapter technically. I think he can one round soldiers, and he can support Deke. He's a very fast support with Deke. He does generally, usually it's like use all fresh, but if you actually support Deke with someone, especially a lot with the Anima affinity and the Thunder affinity, they gain full defense and avoid and like half attack. That can make Deke a lot more competent than I was giving him credit for, and it also helps lots, a lot. I didn't even mean for that to be a pun. So that can be one way you spice it up. The problem with that, as well as many other ways to use Lot, like supporting with Wade, who we'll get into in a second, is that of course you only have so many hero crests. So if you're using both Deke and Lot, and you're also using Rutger, you have one early hero crest and one mid hero crest, and some of them are going to miss out, fall behind, and not be as useful. So that can really impact your team building. I wish you had more hero crests in FE6, but you don't. So that's the risks of using Lot. Is you either miss out on Rutger's early promotion, or you don't have his best support partner. But yeah, if your Lot turns out fine, he's good. But I wouldn't recommend him as high as these. That's really all I have to say on him. The accuracy is a bit of an issue too. Like, axes are just very, very bad in this game. Speaking of bad accuracy, Ray uses Dark Magic. Dark Magic, not that great. Longest flux animation ever. But, you know, he can use Nosferatu. It doesn't weigh him down by that much. He just joins at level 12, so you can insta-promote him or try to train him a little bit before doing so. I find that he never really has the stats to really keep up and become self-sufficient, even with Nosferatu. He's like not fast enough, not accurate enough, and not bulky enough, and his magic is fine, but it's not good enough to one-shot. So he misses all the benchmarks, kind of, but he's also like the only dark magic user you have that you can actually train that isn't Sophia. I know that like is very, it's a lot of qualifiers, but you know what I mean, right? He's the only one that's like, this is the unit that joins on a level that's on par with the rest, kind of, that's like trainable. So he's fine, but he's not particularly great. But hey, if you try him and he turns out well, who am I to judge you? Next category is replacements. These are units that are not as good as the ones I've discussed before, but if the unit I discussed before died, then and you want to have another one of those units, then you can use one of these, and they will be a bit worse, but they're not terrible. They're fine. So I'm gonna do these piece by piece. So I got Trek and Noah first of all, the Ilian cavalry guys. Trek's stats are not very good. He's a little bit bulkier than most calves, but the other stats are really lackluster. I think he has E-rank swords, which is disgusting. Can't even use a steel sword. But if your Allen Lance died, both of them, and you want to have more calves, you can use him. Would probably recommend Noah instead. Noah has like C-rank swords. He took all the sword rank for himself. Can use Killing Edge at the base. Can use Armor Slayer. Can use, what else is C-rank? I can't come up with it from the top of my head. But that's like one thing he can do. I think he's like level 7 at base too, so he's kind of closer to promotion. You probably want to wait a little bit if you're actually using him as a full-time Cavalier. You can also just deploy these as flunkies while you're waiting for better units to join too. Like, they're not forced to be relegated to replacement duty only, but this is how I would generally judge these units. Worst copies of units you got earlier, but they died. But yeah, he's fine. He doesn't have the greatest speed or strength, but it's probably good enough if he gets a couple of good lucky level ups. But again, if a unit is getting bad level ups, you probably want to bench them. Like, if they get 3 bad level ups in a row, don't feel obliged to keep using them. You got Lena, generally considered to be worse than Lu. The distance between them on this list is massive. It actually isn't that big in like a real tier list. I would say Lu is like a B tier unit usually, and Lena is maybe like a C, D kind of tier. Maybe they're both C, depending on who you ask. Lena joins very, very unleveled with like no HP, no defense, no speed, so everything just kind of kills her in one hit. But fortunately, she can attack at range, so if you want to train her and just kill enemies that someone else set up for her, you can do that. Her joining chapter has a lot of choke points that you can lock enemies behind. You can like trap an archer on a space, you can trap a merc on a space, you can trap a bunch of enemies in the top left corner of the map, all for Lena to kill and get a bunch of experience in. If you get lucky with her speed and she grows a bunch of magic, she can just start hitting people two-hitting people, doubling people, sometimes one-hitting people. She has very fast support with Roy to up her attack even more. Sometimes Lena's just get the one-shot things, even in hard mode. More commonly in normal mode, but sometimes in hard mode. And that's a lot of fun. But it does take a lot of effort to train. So know what you are doing when you're choosing Lena. OJ, kind of like a replacement unit for Deke if Deke dies. Now Deke is not a unit that you necessarily need to replace at that point. He's usually benched anyway for me. But if you want to have a hero for the long term and your Deke didn't turn out great, then OJ is one of your only options. Like, what are you going to do? He's a bit faster, worse strength. Like, his bases are worse than Deke's were in his joining chapter. But if you're going to train this unit up, if you're going to compare him at equal levels to Deke, there's going to be a couple of advantages, and the main one is speed. OJ is more likely to double enemies, and the Western Isles has a lot of axe users, so at least he's not the worst unit to train. Similar to what I said about Astolfo, like, he's probably going to be getting by on Weapon Triangle alone for a while, but he does need a fair bit of training to become good. Similar story to Fear. Fear is faster and more... I think her start is better than OJ's. She can use the Woe Dao to get fancy critical hits. Her strength base is good enough to get kills with that. And just generally, the Swordmaster I think is a better class than a hero. The crit bonus helps more than having the ability to use axes, especially hand axes, because hand axes are kind of bad. And a lot of people just call her a bad Rutger. I think Fear deserves to be judged on our own merits. I don't think Fear can ever really replace what Rutger does, because what Rutger provides is early boss killing utility and just staying relevant for the whole game, whereas Fear is just a project unit that eventually, yeah, she does turn into a unit that can do similar things to Rutger, but her strength is significantly lower, so even with crits she has a harder time killing bosses, and her durability is significantly lower, so she has a harder time surviving tough enemy phases than Rutger does, and she's not around from when Rutger is in the early game, so I think these units are a lot different than what a lot of people say like they are. But in the end, I think everyone agrees. Fear is a project unit that joins in the Western Isle arc. If you take some time to train her, she can become pretty good. But you might want to give her like Angelic Robe or something, because her durability is not good. But she does grow very fast. If you kill like an enemy at that point in the game, I think she gets like half a level for each of them. So the training arc ends kind of fast. Then you got Geese. I mean, Geese is not entirely inferior to other axe users like Gonzalez. He has some advantages like water walking and a different stat spread. He's got worse stats in the ones that matter the most, like HP. Well, HP doesn't matter so much, but strength and speed really do. He's worse at that. But he's got better skill, and I think slightly better like luck and res maybe. He's more balanced that way. Unfortunately, he's balanced in the way that Ray is, or Lot is, where they just don't double, don't one-shot, and don't take whole hordes of enemies, but he's fine. You can still turn him into a berserker that can stand on the peak and fight enemies. It will probably take him longer to get to the point where he's actually invincible, like Gonzalez is, because he doesn't have the giant HP or speed to just reduce their hit to 0. But you can probably get there with a couple of lucky level ups or some stat boosters, or just plain out more training. But just know you're dealing with a worse version of him. But I don't think he's like terrible or anything. He's just an option that you have if you, for some reason, don't use Gonzalez. Maybe you missed recruiting him. Maybe your Lena died. Something like that can always happen. Geese is recruited by Roy, so you can always get him. Then we got you over here. If you're gonna use you probably want to reserve 10k for him just to maximize his stats. Like, you're basically buying stat boosters for him at that point. And that, I think, gets him off to the best start he could possibly have. It's probably easier to do that than to try and make a worse version of him work with like 2k extra gold or whatever. So never haggle him down. His bases are still not great. I don't think he won out anything but like generic armor knights, but at least he can use our caliber to kill Pegasus knights if you promote him. I learned the other day that he actually doesn't have the rank at base to use our caliber. You need to promote him, but he starts at a level where you can promote him. You probably should, just to get that juicy sage promotion bonus that I mentioned for Lou. Promoted you is probably fine. Yeah, it costs you your guiding ring, but that goes for like any unpromoted unit here, so I don't think it's fair to hold that specifically against him. It's just you was already in the red because you had to pay gold to recruit him. But yeah, I think you was like pretty mid overall, but not unusable. I never really used them long term though, but yeah, there you go. Then the next category is value units. What I mean by these is that these are units you deploy to get some value out of them for free. Like, they don't need training to do what they do. It doesn't come up often. It might come up once in your playthrough, but you should know what those chapters are. Or it would be good to know what chapters are. You know, I can't force you to know anything. So I'm gonna go through these one by one because they're all a little bit different. So first we got Igren, who is just like another sniper like Klein. A little bit of speed, so able to double a couple things more. Doesn't have the rank to use silver bows at base, but can use the killer bow that she joins with just fine. Probably gonna take a while to get to Merglaze, so really you just deploy her because you're looking through your units that you can deploy in your last couple slots, and it's like, well, I could use more combat, maybe ranged combat. I might need like a longbow shot somewhere, or someone to kill this other ranged enemy through a wall. So might as well bring Igren. Maybe you want to kill the Chapter 16 Bolting's mage or something. That kind of thing, Igren is fine for. And then maybe you're fighting a bunch of wyverns in Chapter 21. You have a bunch of extra slots. Might as well field her to one-round a couple wyverns here and there. These little things, they're helpful to have an Igren for. If you got walls, if you got flyers, or you just need extra ranged combat, Igren is nice. Then you got Garrett. He's useful for chapters with a lot of terrain, where you need someone that's like sit on a peak or a mountain, fight a couple of flyers, maybe wyverns or Pegasi in Ilia, or maybe wyverns in Burn. You just want a guy that like distracts them, maybe kills them, but mostly just keeps them busy. Garrett is not exactly invincible. His speed is not good. His defense is not good, but he does have a lot of strength and HP. And that's really all you need. He might get doubled by enemy wyverns, but he might just dodge them twice. And if he dies, you know, it's an Iron Man. It sucks that a unit you have died. But if you kept him busy for long enough that your other units can get away, then mission accomplished. That's fine. We'll live on. Just don't give him any of the super valuable stuff. That's probably why they gave him C rank access, so you wouldn't be tempted to give him the RMATs. That might be why. Douglas, you get him in like 16x, and he's not particularly useful there, but he does have really high defense to the point where a lot of enemy types just do 0 damage to him, so he can be useful to just sit in a choke point while Nomads just tink on him over and over, or Pegasus Knights tink on him over and over. As long as there's no magic users nearby, Douglas will last practically forever, and again, can be used as a distraction while your audience goes somewhere else, or maybe he sits in a forest in the Wyvern chapter and fights a bunch of Wyverns over and over. They'll probably get doubled, but if they do 2 times 0, then that's fine. Even if he's unequipped, you know, that's utility right there. It doesn't come up for me often, but Iron Mans have these weird, like, tendencies to go off script, and Douglas is pretty good off script. Dayan, kind of like Igren. If you need a bow user, he can do that. He can be in Chapter 21, one-round enemy Wyvern riders at base with no training whatsoever, and that's good. And later on, there might be some other chip he can do, like he can set up a kill for someone else. And he has mounted move, so he can rescue drop people. It's nice. Very simple. Corel, you somehow got to the good ending, and you're now in like the final chapter, and you're like, well, I lost everyone but like 7 units, so I need an 8th unit. And then you got Corel. Somehow one of the units you kept alive is like Bartre or Fear. They recruited him, or maybe they died last chapter. Well, now you have a guy with S rank swords and good enough stats to one-round Manicheats, or maybe with a Worm Slayer he can do it. I don't remember. I never used Corel, but again, sometimes it like once in a lifetime you might use Corel for that. Murnus is a unit I'm also having in here. Sometimes you have like no units that really need to do anything. Maybe you want to send out a unit to die. You want to have a unit that can just distract one group of enemies for a little bit, like, I don't know, Chapter 13 reinforcements. So you just put him somewhere, the enemies move towards them because the AI detects that he's like the closest unit they can get to, and then they kill Murnus, and in the meanwhile you got Roy to the throne and seized before the reinforcements caught up to you. Murnus can do that. Maybe there's some reason you need convoy access during the chapter. I don't know. If you're planning well enough to field Murnus, that probably isn't going to happen to you. So it really is just like I don't have no better options alive kind of person. But it probably exists. Then here we have a category of units that are I would not recommend using. If you're going to field these units, you probably should and do already know that they're like very, very hard to use. Or rather that they almost always take more effort to use than the other units. And you're giving yourself a challenge by using them. That can be very fun. Again, spicing up your playthrough is a thing. I do it too. But you should know that is what you're doing. You should know that these units are spicing it up more than the units that I've discussed so far. I don't think we need a whole lot of elaboration on these. So we got Wolt and Dorothy. They are archers. They eventually aspire to be 2 units that I've already ranked as like not good long-term, like Klein and Igren. But they also come with like a below-average starting point. But they can shoot down wyverns, and that can be helpful sometimes for like 1 or 2 chapters. We got the Armor Knights, Boris, Wendy, and Barth. They have many problems. They do not resemble Osmond from FE7. They may have defense sometimes, but they also get doubled a lot. They are weak to magic, and they don't move very far, and they take heavy terrain penalties. And all these combined make them very hard to do anything substantial with. And also their accuracy is just like bad, especially Wendy just has a lot of trouble hitting things and then hitting very hard. That said, they have a triangle attack together, and it's really funny and cool. You should do it in Chapter 8 at least once in your life. But they got issues for sure. And you got Wade. I'm not entirely sure if Wade deserves to be here, or if he's just like a, I don't know, replacement kind of guy. But his speed is really awful and his accuracy is really awful. And again, to have like support options for him, you need other Hero Crest units. Like his best supports are Lot and Deke, and they need Hero Crests too. So he just makes that problem worse for them. And then also his attack isn't good enough to one-shot most of the time anyway. That said, if a warrior like Lot or Wade gets promoted, they do get like really juicy promotion bonuses. So I don't know. They are not as bad as the other units in here. Wade, but he's definitely bad. And then finally, Sophia. Sophia is intended to be an escort mission for her joining chapter, and she's not meant to be trained. People do it anyway because they like to do weird things. Like, again, do something different than what they usually do. And who would ever voluntarily choose to use Sophia when they're trying to look for good options? No one, right? The main problem I have with Sophia is not her damage output or durability. I can work around those very easily. It's that like she has like 50 hit on enemies. And so if I'm feeding a kill to Sophia, half the time I'm feeding not a kill to Sophia. I'm feeding a problem to my army that now has to kill the enemy that Sophia didn't kill. So be warned when you're trying to use Sophia. That said, if you do get a good Sophia, I had it once in a draft playthrough where I gave her a bunch of stat boosters and got her to Nosferatu tanking. That's really fun. Would definitely recommend Sophia for people looking for a challenge, but would not recommend her for a first Iron Man that you're trying to actually win. But yeah, that's the rankings. That's how I would divide the units of FE6 as far as an Iron Man goes. Hope this is helpful to you. It was fun to make, and I wish you many good luck, RNG, crits, and misses by the enemy side. And let me know if you want an Iron Man. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.